pronounce the name properly. Paulien.
Paulien. It's
Paulien, okay.
almost right.
Okay, perfect. So again, thank you very much, David. And
Thank
Paulien,
you.
you can get started more or get basically prepared right away then.
Okay, thank you. Share my screen. So, open it. So, good afternoon for most of you. For me, it's still early in the morning. I am Paulien, and I've been working for Ventigrate for the last 3 years as an M365 developer. Over the years, I've learned a lot about Power Apps, and I've made a top 10 tips and tricks that I want to share with all of you that I use quite often, and I wish I knew earlier. First, I'm going to start with some tips for working together with Power Apps, because I'm convinced that when you make rules about how to collaborate, it's nicer to work together and it's easier to share knowledge. And afterwards, I will have some tips about developing. The first tip sounds quite obvious, but by using some sort of naming convention in your company between the creator of Power Apps, you can find your way easier in apps of other people if you need to make changes in app of someone else, or if you need to collaborate on a project. You don't necessarily need a naming definition for every component, but for the most common fields, like collections, fields, and galleries, I find it very useful. Just make sure that it's simple to go through other people's codes and that everything is readable. I would recommend that you use Camel case for controls and variables. Camel case begins with a lower prefix, removes all spaces from objects or variable names, and capitalizes the first letter of each word after the first word. For example, a text input control might be named text user email with a small t in front. For data sources, I would recommend you use Pascal case. Pascal case is sometimes referred to as upper camel case. Like camel case, it removes all spaces and capitalizes the first letter of the word. However, unlike camel case, Pascal case also capitalizes the first word. For example, a common data source in Power Apps is a Microsoft Office 365 user connector, which is then named Office 365 users with a capital O. For the screen names, I would recommend that you always use the word screen in it. And because controls always need to be unique across the application, I would recommend when you reuse a control on multiple screens, you can add a reference to the screen at the end of the name of the control, like HS for home screen. When you start making an app, I would recommend that you use different environments so that you can have a test environment where you can test and make changes to your app, and when it's finished, you can export the app and import it into your production environment, so that the app in production is always running the way you want and without any bugs, so the end user always has the best experience. When you want to try the premium connectors or work with Dataverse, but your company doesn't allow that, you can join the Power Apps platform developer plan, and that creates a new environment where you can test the different connectors without having to pay for it. But it's only for test use and not for production. When your project is finished, make sure that you document your project so that when you or someone else picks it up, they know what you did. You can easily create a project template that you can reuse, and everyone documents the same things. Saving the document in, for example, a SharePoint list gets you an overview of all the Power Apps that you are created and who created them. So when someone else is sick or isn't working for the company anymore, everyone can work on the app after reading the project document. A project document doesn't need to be a complicated and long document. You can have a document like this where you can quickly look and see who made the app, who is the app for, when it go live, who is responsible for support, which connectors are being used. And by adding a small summary at the end, people can read what the app is about. And maybe when they want to create an app themselves, they can look if it's already an app like that for which you can start or from which you can reuse some code. For some larger apps, it's necessary that your documentation is more extensive. For this, you can, for example, use PowerDoc from Sebastian Mutwil, which will auto-generate documentation. This will generate a document with all the technical information about the Power App, and it's a very detailed document. Then in the previous session it all went about the COE toolkits, but I'm going to refresh it then. With the COE starter toolkit, you can get statistics about your Power Apps, flows, etc. You can view the COE starter kits in a model-driven app or in a Power BI report. You have three big pillars. You have the admin pillar, the governance pillar, and the nurture pillar. In the admin pillar, you can see for all your environments how many apps and flows you have, but also who built the most apps and which connectors people are using. You can see which apps are used the most or how many actions each flow has. You can also see which apps or flows aren't being used frequently or not at all. For the governance pillar, the COE toolkit calculates an archiving score, which gives you an indication that the app may not be used anymore or that there are words like test in it. You can also set up governance rules, like the app needs to have a description or the support details need to be filled in. Every user can see his app and see if they are compliant with the governance rules. The admin user can see this in an overview of all the apps. In the nurture pillar, you can start and see which users are building small apps and flows and which users are building larger apps. And by looking at that, you can see who may need which training or who may build so many apps that they can maybe train his or her colleagues. In these screens, you can see examples of the dashboard from the COE toolkit, like how many apps you have for each environment, who is building the most apps, and a support report, summary report of an app or flow that gives you an overview if you are compliant with the governance rules. These are all examples of the Power BI dashboard. Next, I am going to give you some tips about developing Power Apps, and this will also include some demos. The first developing tip is collections to the rescue. By default, if you get records from SharePoint, you get the first 500. You can set this to 2000 items, but it's still too little if you work with large lists. By putting your items directly in the collection, you can get unlimited number of items. And because collections are also stored locally and doesn't need to make a request to, by example, SharePoint every time you want to use the data, your data loads a lot faster, making your app faster because you only retrieve the data once in the beginning. But because it's stored locally, don't forget to push the data back to the source when you want to update or add the records. Sometimes you want to open a Power App on a specific screen, or you want the data from a specific item to be shown directly when you open the app. This can be done by using parameters in the URL, which you can easily define in your app. By using this, you can, for example, use one app but have a couple of variations of a certain form, and depending on through which link the user gets to the Power App, it gets a different form. Like for example, in the red box, it says my ID, then the app will open with the data from that item. Some apps are made to use on your laptop, but some apps are also made to use on your tablet or smartphone, and not everyone has the same size of device. By making your Power App responsive, everyone can have a great experience because the app changes the size of components to fit your screen. You can do this by using the parent value, which is equal to the screen. For example, if you take the parent width as width for a component, this component will always be the full width of your screen. We are now going to put the previous 3 tips in simple Power App so that you can see how they're being used. We're going to make an app that displays lists items from a collection. We're going to make sure that it is responsive and that you can navigate it through the app itself, but also using parameters in the URL. So we're going to do it for a Canvas app. Phone demo 19.2. So first we're going to select the SharePoint list that we want the data from. I already created a list for that. Now we're going to, whenever the app starts, we're going to use clear collect to get the data from the SharePoint list and put it in our collection. And now we can use, after we run on start, we can see that all the data is now in our collection and stored locally, so we don't have to do any requests anymore. I'm going to quickly change this to a more useful name. Now we're going to display the data in a gallery so that we can actually use the data. And as you see, we're using the collection because otherwise it's still going to make requests every time. Click location. It's a list with holidays because everyone loves holidays. I'm going to add an arrow so that we can select and later on see the details of the screen. So now we are collecting the data. And then we are going to make sure that it is responsive to collection. You can do that by width. Just say parent dot width, and it will always be the width of the parent. Also for the height, you can do it. Parent dot height. It looks the same as before, but now when you have different devices, it will scale up and down with it. For the use of parameters, I'm going back to the on start. And I'm quickly going to paste some code in and I'll explain. This will get the parameter doc ID if I use it, and it will put it in the variable var current doc. By doing this, I can use the var current doc in the whole application, and it will always have the parameter ID that is given through the URL. Going to display that quickly. A new screen. Going to make a detail screen. That has a title. A bit smaller. It's bigger. Now we're going to see if this variable is blank. So if there isn't any IDs given through the URL, then you just give me the selected holiday from the gallery, and else you're going to give me the title from the holiday that we asked through the URL. Going to make also get the description. You can just reuse these codes because it's going to be the same for every detail you put in. Going to do the correct naming, otherwise I don't use my own tips. The label for the location. And one for the date. And then we have all the components of the detail screen. So also add a back button so that we can go back to the gallery. Go back. So now we're going to add one more parameter. This time I'm going to set it in on the starter screen. We're going to check if the parameter view is equal to detail. Need to go to the detail screen, of course, and otherwise we're just going to see the home screen where you can select which item you want to pick. Oh, no. Okay, now we can quickly test it. You can see, oh, I haven't navigated it. And now you can see we can, oh yeah, I forgot all my navigations. Now we can go back and forward and we'll see from the gallery. And I've already set up the link. For example, if you want to go to Easter Monday and only want to see the details of Easter Monday, you can format your column to create a link. And as you can see here are the parameters, detail, and the ID of that item that you are selected. And then you can just go click on it. And it will say Easter Monday. You can also go back to the details list if you want Valentine's Day. That's something new. So that was it for the first demo. Yes. Now, for sometimes in larger projects, you want to use the same component multiple times. For this, you can create a reusable component and start using it as many times as you want. If you update the base component, all the components that use this base will change with it, so that you don't have to make changes all over your project. Make sure that the control remains simple and clean. PowerUp also has a lot of connectors, but sometimes you want to use your own API or public API that doesn't already have a connector in PowerUps. This can be done by using a custom connector. In this, you can define your own controls, calls, and actions, and add security if necessary. There are also a lot of people that create components and want to share them with everyone. In the Pcf Gallery, you can find components that someone already built, and you can download them and use them in your own project. Or use them as a starting point and change the code to fit your needs. For the demo, we're going to make first a simple reusable component, then a custom connector, and lastly, if there's still some time, I will show you how to use components from the Pcf Gallery. Not going to save this app. I'm going to make a new one. So first we're going to make, for making a reusable component, you just go to components and add a new component. This gives you a new screen where you can create it and later on use it. I'm going to make a custom input form. You can reuse through the whole app. Add some label. We're going to give it some color. White texts. And we're going to add some styling that you can later on see how easy it is to change that style. Okay, then we're going to input text. Double lines. Go back to our components, rename it. Title. Now, if you're going to put it in our main app, go to custom and here you find the input form. And you can edit as many times as you want. But now it's not doing anything. You can change the title. That's not what we want. For doing that, we can just go back to our components, to our base, and set custom properties. By setting these, you can store which variables, which titles are used for which components. It's an input and it's a text. So create, and then here we just say this will be equal to the input form dot title. And then we can see that component here, and we can say we can change the text to what are you doing today, and then it will change. Here you can say something different. It's the same base components, but you can reuse it without any problem. Now you can see that we have two components. We can also say maybe we want to add a save button. That we can save every question in a different element. Quickly change the color because this isn't fitting together. Yep, that's better. And you can see that it's already, if you go back, the two items already now have a save button. So it's so easy to just make one change, and you don't have to change it to every element. Like maybe I don't want a blue-green background anymore, but I want the orange, and all the components change with it. So it's very useful if you're making large forms or something, that you can reuse your code and don't have to duplicate it every time. So next we are going, don't save it, I have enough demo apps in my, we're going to import, we're going to create our own custom connector. I found a free API of a cocktail databank. For you guys, it's almost time for drinks. For me, it might be a bit early, but yeah, that was fine. You go to data, and here you have custom connectors. You can choose from which you can create. You can import from GitHub. You can import from Open API file. I'm now going to use a blank one. I'm going to name it cocktail because it's about cocktails, of course. And I'm going to see a nice icon for my connector. It's going to be HTTPS, and it's going to this host. And this is just the host that you can find here. So we're going to set up some security. You can have no authentication depending on which you need. I now need an API key. They say it here. Use an API key. The label is API key. The parameter name is authorization. And now we can start defining our actions. So getting cocktail information. Return information about the cocktails, and we will call it get C from cocktails. Now we're going to import the request by sample, that you don't have to find it out yourself. This also can be found just here, the base URL without the search definition. This has to be in it. You can search. Import. See, it finds that it has a query at the end because I put $S so that we can give parameters with it. And we're also going to give a response, and we're also going to make it from an example. It's very easy. you just take the search query, paste it in, and then you get the response. And Power Apps can use that to see which components the call will return. You can also do this by using spec editor, but then it's going to be a bit more complicated. I think this is very easy because you just have to paste URLs. Here in the validation, you can see that it's succeeded. So that normally everything is set up. I'm going to only add one action, and then we can create the connector. Sometimes it goes quick, sometimes it takes a while. It goes quick today. See, now it's created. And we can actually test it already here. Test. Just say I think it's I don't know why it doesn't. We're going to just use it in an app. That's clearer. Small canvas for cocktails. These custom connectors are premium connectors, so you do need to have that set up. But here I can see that I've created a new connector. The API key was 1. I want to save that. And now we can just different gallery. Don't want that gallery. But this one. Oh, and for the items, I'm going to say cocktails. Cocktails get C. Parameter. Dots. It's a double point. So now we can say this item dot thumbnail, and we want the title. It isn't called title. And we want the alcohol level, maybe. If you want, is it alcoholic or not? And just like that, you have your own custom connector that you can use the data from. But you can also do this with connectors from your, if you want your own API or data bank to go in here and it doesn't already have a connector. You can set it up like this. Now I'm going to show you the Pcf Gallery. It's nice. People are building complicated and less complicated components and putting them in here. You can search for categories, but most of the time I go just to the search and I say, do I want a component for a model-driven app, a canvas app, or a portal app? You can just select them and it will give the list of all the components that you can use. For now, I've selected the calendar control because I already imported it. You can just download it here. And then when you go to Power Apps, you can import it. It's the wrong environment. So you can see I have multiple environments depending on which rights they're in. And you can see I've already imported it. Just do it by import, browse, and I don't know where I put it, but the imports can take a couple of minutes. That's why I already have imported it for you guys. You can open it and see what's in it, but you don't actually need to make changes. You can just, it also creates this model-driven app, and you can just start with it without making any configurations. I've already made 2 calendars, like personal calendar, and this is all set up without doing actually anything. I can just add events like out for dinner, personal. We're going out Florida. The color going to be tomorrow. Maybe also not in the morning. 7 to 10, maybe. I can save it. Oh, I made a new calendar for that. Resources, personal. Here it is. And now we can see, without setting anything up, I can create a calendar that normally isn't in Power Apps. So yeah, it's quite fun to look through the gallery if you have time. There are a lot of for some you do need to set up some settings and configuration. So yeah, just try it out and have fun with it. Were actually already my 10 tips. For a quick summary, we have some quick tips about working together, like the naming, the COE toolkit, the documentation, and then some tips about developing, like the use of parameters, the responsive, new custom connectors, and the Pcf Gallery.